Welcome to another episode of my podcast that's been with me. Today we're going to talk about death. We're going to talk about death in general, different taboos, cultural reference, and so much more. In my previous podcast, I was talking about my family experience of my family from my perspective, and I slightly touched on a death part. And I was laying in bed a week ago and I was like, I really want to talk about something serious. I'm not always filming videos about lipstick lesbians and their collaborations, their different type of issues with their launches. Sometimes I want to talk about something very deep. And death always caught my curiosity. I was, in a way, it might sound crazy and weird, but I was fascinated with death in general, like the birth and death and the cycle of life. Because in a very curated and controlled life, when you get born and you have to choose your path, you are going to school without your consent, I'd say, most of the time, or like going to a kindergarten, you're socializing, and you have to choose your career path. Sometimes you're like 16 or 17, you have no idea what you want to do in life, and you're like, you have to pick a college, you have to get a job, you have to get married, you have to give birth, and you don't have much time, and it's all rushed and it's all forced sometimes, like not for every single person, but I'm talking about majority. And this is a natural path of life, which is totally fine. I'm not going to say that it's wrong. What I'm saying here is death is something that we cannot control. Death is something that is out of the reach, and no one knows when it's gonna come. Like, only astrologers probably. Not every single astrologist, guys. I'm kidding. Okay, so we're gonna go deeper. How this fear of death has formed in society of 21st century. Because if you try to look back, pageant times where people were not scared of death, they were cherishing death, and they saw this as a natural way of living, as a spring, like everything gets to a rise, then we have summer, everything is blooming, then fall, then starts dying out, and finally winter, everything dies, and then the cycle repeats, which is pretty much normal. With people, it was the same. That was the main reason why it was more about community, where a person intuitively knew that she or he are going to die in the nearest future. They went to their bed and they were getting to a stage where people could visit this person and say goodbyes, or maybe just talk and help this person with the transition. And they didn't have all the cemeteries, they didn't have graves, they were all buried in one place because it was given a sense of community. You came from the community and now you are in the community. That was pretty much it up until 11th, probably 12th century, where there was a rise of church, there was a rise of Christianity, and of course, a self-centered mode for people. I mean, it was very popular to tell that if you sin, then you're going to burn in hell. If you are a religious person, you're kind, you help your neighbors, and you believe in God, then most likely you're going to go to a paradise. And people, of course, they were forced to think about their future. They were forced to think that they're going to be judged right at the end of their life. And their soul is a part of someone's creation. And that is the main reason why they have no control over this. And you're like, ugh, this sounds kind of bad. And people started getting in a position that, when I'm going to go, like paradise or hell? Am I going to die? What's going to happen? But it's more about European society. We're going to talk about different cultures and different religions real quick. We're going to touch on that. But for now, let's just real quick talk about European society. And closer to the 20th century, people, they got into the mode of a forbidden death. Forbidden death meant specifically when we have so much hospitals, antibiotics, and a lot of the times, lots of illnesses, they were cured, and they are cured. That is the main reason why through ads and different commercials, we see a lot of not even celebrities, just like regular people talking about delay of death and longevity of life. So for example, an old person 20 or 30 years ago would live up until 65, 70 years old. And like, for probably women, maybe even less. Then in 21st century, the number is so much higher. It's like 80 plus years. I mean, again, average 70 to 90 years old. I mean, it's really hard. And some of the body parts like brain, it's not meant to last that long. And that is the main reason why dementia is probably one of these diseases that is very, very popular right now. It's everywhere. It's like 55 million people over worldwide, they have dementia. And we're not even going to talk about cancer and any other diseases. But hospitals and clinics, of course, that's a great innovation, but they created this idea that people can live longer and people can postpone death longer. That is the main reason why it's like a forbidden death title that probably people are like, oh, it's so far away. That is the main reason why I'm kind of afraid of it, but not in particular. And, I would give you a quick, let's say, observation from my part. My grandma, she was never into churches. She was not into religion. When she crossed the line of like 50, being 50 or 45 years old, she started thinking about death, about religion, and what's going to happen. So eventually, probably most of people, they start thinking about death, and they start thinking about their choices in life, and are they going to be in hell or in paradise? But of course, like I talked about 11th, 12th century, but we have like a huge gap between this period of time and forbidden death. And plague was all over Europe. It was definitely killing a lot of people. People didn't know about plague, and they believed in church. They believed in, like, if you sin, then you're gonna die. If you don't sin, then you're not gonna die. And then they saw people around them being like faithful and religious, dying. And that is the main reason they realized that probably church is not always right. And a lot of artists, they started implementing different parts of death into architecture. Like the rise of Gothic style was probably like 14th century, and that was the main reason why people wanted to express this fear. They wanted to express this idea of death, of rot, and that is not it. It's not really that beautiful and natural as it used to be. And they started creating tombs, or like transit tombs. Of course, they always were there, like ancient Egypt, hello. But in these type of tombs, there was a creation of a very rich person, not only one in particular, but there are like a lot of very rich people wearing beautiful clothes, but under that there was like half skeleton, half rotten body, half like skull, and with the worms surrounded this person. So it wasn't that magical and beautiful as it used to be. Like, for example, ancient Egypt, when we were shown the surface of a tomb, but at the same time underneath there was a corpse. So that is a Gothic style. It was heavily influenced by pandemic like plague. Let's talk about Azuri chapels. This is a chapel of bones in Portugal. This kind of like chapel is made of human bones, and it's pretty chilling. That is the main reason why it was heavily influenced. Real quick, we touched on the subject of art and people expressing in Gothic style, but later on, there was the first creation of Dracula. People were talking about werewolves. I have a couple of podcasts specifically talking about werewolves and vampires. But in today's podcast, I want to show you that this is an extreme version of death and how to fight back death. I'd say Dracula, I don't even remember, was it 17th century, guys? You can correct me in the comments, I don't remember, but Dracula was the first ever novel, I guess it's novel, where it was defeating death, where you had supernatural powers. It was in different translations, by the way. The translation that we got in was an original translation, turned out wasn't that original and was heavily corrected by a translator, not an author. But you can get an idea that people, they try to idealize a fantasy of immortality, but not only immortality for just like living corpse, but a beauty, infinite life, and then of course this superpower that I can regain control over death. And that is the reason why people, they're so desperate to fight back death, to try to, just like create as many films and different books about vampires, beautiful vampires. I mean, like, it changed a little bit, but the core idea is to fight back death. But to get, a little bit different perspective, if you have all the time in the world to do whatever you want, aren't you gonna get bored eventually? Like, you have the same personality all the time. I hope, probably, I believe that you have your loved ones, you have your favorite people, they're gonna die. Maybe someone would ask to turn them into a vampire, I don't know. But at the same time, there are probably gonna be some people that are not gonna be able to go through this transition, and they're still gonna die, or they're not gonna be happy with this decision, and they're gonna try to take their own lives. That is the main reason why, if you try to watch it from different, angles, if you have a sea of water and then you can drink as much as you want to, you lose interest in this. You need this for survival, but still you lose interest. But when you have only one glass of water, you're going to cherish every single drop. That is the main reason why it's very interesting analogy, because when you have a short period of time, You have to kind of plan everything in detail at one point, but life is so unpredictable that it can get you in so many different places. And even if you're going to plan this, it's not going to work out the same way for some people. And let's talk about geography. Let's talk about different countries and how they mourn people, or they don't actually mourn people. In the United States, Europe, Russian Federation, people, they tend to wear black colors. This is a way to express the end of life, void. This is lacking color of life, and that is the main reason why people, they're mourning and they're in this grief. And black is a way to show that someone died. And if we're going to talk about India, this is entirely different concept. They believe that your soul is transitioning when it's in the body, and that is the main reason why white is a way to celebrate. This is a way to show that this soul is going to go in a little bit different realm, or it's going to have a little bit better probably option in the future. If we're going to talk about Islamic or Arabic countries, they believe, as far as I can tell, or as far as I could find this information, they believe that every single person who's very rich and who's very poor has the same treatment when they die. So they have to be buried under like 25 hours, and then they are carefully wrapped in simple sheets of cotton, of plain cotton, white color. Then let's talk real quick about South Africa. They wear red color as a way to show that blood is kind of like painful, if I'm not mistaken, and that is the main reason why they're showing the grief of a family. So family is basically wearing red to show that they're relatives of a dead person. And then Asia, well, here's just so many different traditions, but if we're going to talk real quick about China, they bring, like, I didn't know up until I went to China, but in Beijing, at least in Beijing, a lot of the times people, they're Muslims. They have a lot of Muslims, but at the same time, they either Muslims or they don't believe in God at all. And that is the main reason why they have really old traditions, family traditions, probably in different villages when they go to a cemetery and they bring some kind of like banknotes or maybe papers with phones or whatever, and then they burn them, and they expect their relatives to give all the blessings of this material stuff. I don't know why they need this in another realm, but then they expect a blessing from their relatives in return. And then Mexico, of course, you can tell that they have the entire celebration, celebrating dead people, and there's a little bit different type of experience. That is the main reason why, talking about death, yeah, we have tamed times and forbidden death, I would say, through like thousands of years. But at the same time, still, different religions, different nations, they process this in a different way. This podcast is a little bit more relatable to European society, like United States, Russian Federation of 21st century. And now let's talk about taboos. I would say it's a very hard topic, and it's more about philosophy of death itself, because we discussed India, we discussed, again, Mexico, different type of approaches. But in a European society, people feel grief, especially like when a person dies from a disease. For example, again, I talked about my grandma, she has dementia. I talked about my grandpa who had dementia, and we felt a relief when he died. And it's almost a taboo to say things like this. When you're supposed to grieve, we were mourning my grandpa and we were crying. But in 2 or 3 days, we felt a relief that it finally was over and we didn't have to take care of a person with a disease. And I mean, like when it's an 85-year-old person with dementia, or maybe someone who has cancer, someone who's over 65, this is a little bit different type of experience. Of course, people are going to mourn a grandpa, grandma, their relative, but in a different way. I know that a lot of the times older generation, like old people, if they live together for a long period of time, the entire life, and one of them dies, some of their spouses, they die in like 2 or 3 months because they're so in tune and they were always together. They just die out of sadness. This is natural, a way of life. And there is a little bit different way to see death for a child who went through a terrible disease, or the child that died in a car crash, or any other circumstances that cannot be controlled, as well as like a young adult that died for like no reason or because of a disease. And of course, lots of the times people are going to ask a question, why? And that's a very hard topic, because when a position of a grandpa or grandma that died, like either from like being really old or from disease, there's still a natural way of thinking. But with a child, and especially a long disease, there's a great film, by the way, that is very hard to watch, but I'd say that is showing the essential of the family tragedy that is called My Sister's Keeper, where, real quick, there's a sister that had to fight back her own parents. Her older sister was dying from cancer, and because of that, her younger sister had to go through different surgeries, and that is the main reason why it was not only painful, but it was time consuming. And her older sister turned out, like at the end of the film, was shown that she asked her younger sister to get against her mom, because mom was the one that didn't want to give up the life of her oldest daughter. And this is the hardest part, that even when a child is super tired and the body is exhausted, parents, they're not giving up, which is a great, I mean, they're looking for a miracle. And at the same time, it's given the torture of to give up a child or to keep on a torture in a way if this disease is not going to be curable. But where's the diversity between an older generation and a kid? For an older generation, people psychologically understand that this person had a life, had a story, had an experience, had a family, and could build a life around him or her. And with a child, there's a missing opportunity. Like, there's a mourning of a future that's not going to be there. There's a mourning of memories, they're not going to be built there. And especially psychologically, it's really hard and tough for a parent to know that their child is going to die before them. It's unnatural. It's not in a natural order. And that is the main reason why a lot of the times parents, they're not even allowing a thought of just giving up. Or at least if one parent is giving up, the other one is most likely is going to go through divorce, which is a horrific situation to be in. And here comes this taboo. And here comes a story that I was talking about right at the beginning of this podcast, where you understand that we were given certain promises. Of course, these promises are not real promises, but there's a cure from cancer. There's a cure from, I don't know, like this disease. There's a cure from that disease. And people, they have hope. And they're not willing to give up this hope because they know that someone was cured. There's not even the slightest chance that people are going to give up their hope, because my mom, she had a classmate and he had cancer. Unfortunately, he didn't have a lot of time. He found out that he had cancer, and then in a year and a half, I would say, like in a year and 6 months, unfortunately he died. And he tried, I mean, this was a real fighter. Like my mom, she told me that it was really hard to talk to him because he called her and he was in a severe pain, and he was telling this to my mom, and my mom, she was like, I don't know what to say. It's getting in a position where people, they don't even know how to react. They want to help, but they don't know how to help, and they try to ask some stupid questions because like they don't even know what to ask. And that is the main reason why I would say this is super tough. And in this position, sometimes relatives, they think that if a person dies because they see this severe condition, it's more like they don't want to lose a person, but they're mourning this person while his or she's alive. And in my opinion, I was like, is it a real problem of death? So people, of course, they get frustrated, they get angry. Why me? And we're, again, going to a position of self-centered approach in 11th or 12th century, where it was a tomb or written on a grave, the year of birth and a year of death, name, and all the families and relatives. And in a modern society, there's anger that, why me? Of all people, everyone is happy, everyone is alive, why me? And I mean, this is a question that, I mean, like every single person would ask, which is normal. And of course, everyone tries to see this from a perspective of their position. But at the same time, is it a frustration at a death concept, or the fact that God is manipulating with a soul for people that believe in Christianity? Or is it a fact that we were promised a healthy lifestyle, not even lifestyle, but life, hospitals that can cure terrible disease, and death is probably a relief in this position. And people are not even afraid of death when they have these conditions. They welcome death as a friend. Yeah, I would say it's really, really tough and hard. And I always think about different people. It's not like I'm not criticizing anyone. God, no. I'm not saying that I'm an expert. I'm just thinking. And this is a thought that is going in my mind quite often, I'd say. I mean, like, and yeah, sometimes I think, why did this guy die when he was 30 years old? Like, why? Out of just nowhere. And someone lives up until they're 90 and they're asking for death. They're literally begging for death, but it's not coming. And what is a grand plan? Is like something has to happen eventually for a reason, I guess. I think that we should stop thinking of death as a taboo and maybe even hide in the darkness and try to bring this hard conversations and have this conversation. There are people out there, they need support. They need to know that maybe all those emotions, like, they're not alone, and they would read someone is going through the same thing. It's really tough, because sometimes I understand why like parents of their kids, and they say like they were robbed of their future. And this is the main idea why they hate death, because they know that it doesn't have to be this way. It's not supposed to be this way. And I don't even know what they're going through. And my heart is with them. But at the same time, I mean, what is a grand plan? What do you think, guys? What is a grand plan of it all? But the death is just, I feel like it has no right and wrong. It's just a way for people to live and experience whatever they meant to experience in this life path. And death is just the end. It's just the end and the beginning of someone's new life. I love you all so much, guys, and I'm going to see you in my next podcast. That's fine with me. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And I don't really want to come across as rude or disrespectful, because this is a very, very sensitive topic, very sensitive subject. And this is not to mock someone, make fun or poke fun, or say like they should just move on with it. They have time to mourn and process this position. I'm just thinking about like, why? Like, why for these people it's this like really hard life, and for others it's just a happy life and a happy death. I don't know, but I'm open for conversation and I want to know your thoughts. Love you all so much, guys, and I'll see you next time.